10 unsolved mysteries that will make your head spin. An unsolved mystery can be a small sliver right underneath the skin, annoying, perplexing, and curious all at the same time. We want to solve the mystery right away but love the thrill of putting all the pieces together. The knowledge that it might never be solved only salivates our curiosity. Well, to whet your appetite, here are 10 unsolved mysteries that will make your head spin.
1. The Mothman. In 2002, Richard Gere starred in a horror film about a West Virginia town that experienced a strange number of supernatural sightings leading up to the collapsing of a local bridge, the Mothman Prophecies. The film was based on disturbing real, otherworldly occurrences that took place in Point Pleasant, West Virginia from 1966 to 1967. Still to this day, the numerous strange events and sightings of giant moth-like visitors go unexplained. Here is the actual story that influenced the film and legend. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge, a suspension bridge connecting Point Pleasant, West Virginia and Galilee, Ohio, collapsed, killing 46 people. Spanning the Ohio River, this I-bar chain bridge, built in 1928, met its fate during rush hour as people were returning home from work and families were going into town to begin their Christmas shopping. What caused this well-traveled bridge to collapse wasn't a mystery. A defect in one of the I-bar links caused a crack to form which led to the catastrophe. The real mystery was the appearance of a strange visitor sighted several times by the citizens of Point Pleasant during the months leading up to the tragedy. This strange visitor was known as the Mothman. The Mothman first made it into the news on November 16, 1966 when the Point Pleasant Register reported couples see man-sized bird. Creature. Something. Point Pleasant residents Steve and Mary Millett along with Roger and Linda Scarberry were driving near the McClinty Wildlife Reserve on West Virginia Route 62, when they crested a hill and came face to face with a creature they claim was 7 feet tall with large red eyes and a 10-foot wingspan. Swerving around the creature they attempted to drive away. However, seconds later, they found the Mothman was back in front of their car. More frightened than ever, the two married couples headed back for town, traveling at almost 100 miles per hour. All the while, the creature cruised along the ground right behind them and, in some instances, swiftly soaring 50 feet above their car. As the car turned on a farm road, the creature once again managed to block their path. This time it laid in the road like a lump resembling a dead dog, as though it were waiting for someone to step out of the car and investigate. Not wanting to fall for what may have been a trap, they backed up and made their way back to town. Later that night, they returned to the farm road, this time with the deputy sheriff. The lump in the road was gone, but they did find a strange pile of dust in its place. Yet, this wasn't the first time someone had actually seen this strange being. On November 12, 1966, gravediggers working in Clendenin, West Virginia claimed to have seen the half-man half-moth creature flying through the trees just above their heads. In the coming months, reports of Mothman sightings flooded local papers. Many citizens reported hearing noises outside. When they went to investigate, they found the creature's red eyes glowing in their flashlights. Some residents even blamed the creature for their missing pets. One farmer told the Point Pleasant Register that his German Shepherd went missing just after some giant beast with red eyes was seen on his property. Wildlife experts believed a sandhill crane to be the most likely culprit. However, it doesn't explain how the bird acquired a taste for dog meat, or why the sightings of the mysterious Mothman stopped right after the bridge collapse. This led many people to believe that the Mothman may have been there to warn the citizens of Point Pleasant. John Keel, who wrote the book The Mothman Prophecies in 1975, claims residents were experiencing precognitions and premonitions that the Silver Bridge was going to collapse. Some cryptozoology theorists even claim that the Mothman has been sighted before many more large-scale tragedies around the globe, even 9/11. To this day, the Mothman remains an unsolved mystery, but a mystery the citizens of Point Pleasant still celebrate once a year, in September, during the Mothman Festival. They've even erected a statue in the middle of town right outside the Mothman Museum, making Point Pleasant a great stop on your next road trip. In John Keel's 1975 book The Mothman Prophecies, he hypothesizes that the Mothman was sent as a warning to the people of Point Pleasant about the 1967 Silver Bridge collapse. However, another theory states that the Mothman may have been a part of the terror leading up to the collapse. There are those who believe the Mothman was sent to Point Pleasant as part of a centuries-old curse placed on the region. In the late 18th century, the newly independent United States of America was pushing its way westward. At the time, the Shawnee Nation existed in what is now known as Mason County, West Virginia. Their leader, Chief Cornstalk, was initially at war with the invaders, but later worked for peace between the two nations. The chief traveled to Fort Randolph with 3 other members of his tribe, including his son, on a diplomatic mission. Acting on his own accord, the fort commander decided to hold the chief and his companions as prisoners. The next day, an unknown tribe of natives killed a soldier traveling outside the fort. Angered by the death of one of their own, the soldiers brutally executed all 4 Shawnees. As he lay dying, Chief Cornstalk uttered the following: "I came to your house a friend, and you murdered me. You have murdered by my side, my son, the young chief Ilinispsco, for this may the curse of the Great Spirit rest upon this spot. May it be blighted by nature, its enterprises blasted, and the energies of its people paralyzed by the stain of our blood?" The curse of Chief Cornstalk is well known in Mason County, the county where Point Pleasant resides. After the bridge collapse, an article appeared in the Point Pleasant Register attributing the collapse to the curse. Of course, it's easy to dismiss the curse until you realize that Mason County and many of its neighboring counties have seen quite a few horrific tragedies. December 6, 1907, in the nearby county of Marion, the worst coal mine disaster in American history took place. At 10:28 a.m. an explosion deep in the mine causes a collapse that killed over 360 miners. April 21, 1930, fire rips through the Ohio State Penitentiary in Columbus, less than 80 miles from where Chief Cornstalk was killed. Reports say that prisoners burned to death in their cells as guards refused to let them out while the fire engulfed the penitentiary. By the time the flames were extinguished, 320 people were dead. June 1944, the region was rocked by a series of deadly tornadoes. The incident, which lasted 2 days, left 134 people dead. August 10, 1968, 9 months after the Silver Bridge collapse, Piedmont Flight 230 crashed on its landing approach to Kanawha Airport, located 30 miles from Mason County. 35 people were killed. November 14, 1970, a Southern Airways DC-9 crashed into a mountain near Huntington, West Virginia, just over the Mason County border. All 75 on board were killed. March 2, 1976, a man walks into the Mason County Jail in Point Pleasant with a shotgun and a bag full of dynamite. He asks to spend the night with his wife, who was being held after murdering the couple's 2-month-old baby. He detonates the explosives, leveling the jail and killing 5 people, his wife and himself. January 1978, a train derailment at Point Pleasant dumped thousands of gallons of chemicals. The toxic mess seeped its way into the ground, poisoning several wells. April 27, 1978, a cooling tower being constructed at a Willow Island power station collapsed, killing 51 construction workers. In 1950, Chief Cornstalk's remains were interred at Point Pleasant's 2 Way Park. A 12-foot tall statue was also erected as a monument to the chief. However, another monument at Point Pleasant stands 86 feet tall and commemorates the memory of those men killed in the 1774 Battle of Point Pleasant, a battle in which Chief Cornstalk's Indian Confederation was defeated. That statue was dedicated on August 22, 1909, a month after its scheduled dedication. The night before the initial ceremony, a bolt of lightning struck the monument, causing the delay. In 1921, another bolt of lightning struck the monument, damaging it once more. The chief's curse was believed to have a lifespan of 200 years, explaining why no other disasters have been attributed to Chief Cornstalk since 1978.
2. Göbekli Tepe. About 11,000 years ago, in a remote corner of the cradle of civilization, Stone Age people who lacked cities, agriculture and metal tools built an enormous complex of multi-ton stone pillars called Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill, in a region in modern-day Turkey. The high degree of artistic skill and organizational wherewithal discovered at the site has caused the field of archaeology to question one of its most basic theories. The complex. Situated at the northwest edge of Mesopotamia in southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe is a tell, that is, an ancient man-made hill built from the accumulated layers of millennia of building atop the ruins of those who came before. At the lowest level, Its most significant construction dates back to 10,000 to 11,000 BC, a period that predates the introduction of writing, metal tools and the wheel in the region by 6,000 years. Armed with only the simplest technology, the ancient builders used stone tools to chip enormous blocks of limestone into pillars, each weighing between 11 and 22 tons. Then hundreds of people would work together to move the pillars anywhere from 100 to 500 meters to the complex. At the site, the large stones were arranged in circular rings of approximately 8 upright pillars, each. Every pillar is comprised of 2 stones that form a T-shape. Typically, 6 pillars, connected with low walls, are set around the circumference, and 2 taller pillars are situated in the center. The tallest pillars reach 16 feet in height, and the largest rings are 65 feet in diameter. To date, nearly 200 pillars have been found at the dig. A menagerie of animals, including bulls, foxes, snakes, vultures, spiders, insects, donkeys, gazelles and lions, have been carved in relief into the stones. There are also bizarre depictions of humanoid forms hewn into the stones as well. Experts have noted that, unlike other Stone Age art, which typically depicted herd animals, at Göbekli Tepe, the images are of a scary, fantastic world of nasty-looking beasts. The excavation. Although archaeologists had been aware that there were old limestone slabs on the innocuous hill since the 1960s, the remnants had been dismissed as the broken gravestones of a medieval cemetery, and the site was essentially ignored for decades. Then in 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt took a second look and realized that the unusually rounded shape of Old Potbelly was something that only man could have created. Thinking it had to be a Stone Age site, Schmidt got to work. In addition to traditional excavation, which has unveiled a treasure trove of flint tools and uncovered 4 of the rings, geomagnetic surveys were conducted in 2003, that revealed 16 additional rings buried in the hill. These remain undisturbed due to the relative locations of the rings and their method of burial. It appears that every now and then, the builders would fill in a ring, pillars and all, with dirt, gravel, flint, old tools and animal bones. Then they would erect a new circle on or near the old, buried one. The result is 20 rings piled together, higgledy-piggledy, under the earth. Although no one knows why the complex was built, Dr. Schmidt believes it was a religious temple, and perhaps even a burial site. Many experts agree. One has noted that, in particular, the prominent depictions of vultures indicates that the site may have served as the religious home of a death cult. In ancient times in the region, it was widely believed that the carrion eaters transported the flesh of the dead up to heaven. Others, like Whitman College's Gary Rolefson, think that the vast distance and time and lack of any writing makes deciphering the builders' motivations a vain task. There's more time between Göbekli Tepe and the Sumerian clay tablets, etched in 3300 BC, than from Sumer to today. Trying to pick out symbolism from prehistoric context is an exercise in futility. Importance of Göbekli Tepe. Of the many discoveries made at the site, perhaps the most intriguing is that the builders likely did not live in settlements, but rather were hunters and gatherers. This is remarkable because, heretofore, most experts espoused the Neolithic Revolution. This theory held that in order to build monumental structures, a society needed to have the organization and resources that only comes about through agriculture and settlement. The evidence found at Göbekli Tepe, however, appears to be strong enough to overcome what had, until quite recently, been conventional archaeological wisdom. First, unlike its arid landscape today, 11,000 years ago, the Sanliurfa region was a paradise that teemed with game, fruit, nut trees and wild grains, all readily available to collect without the need for farming. Second, archaeologists, who have been digging at the site for nearly 20 years, have yet to find any evidence of the hearths, cooking, houses and garbage dumps found in the typical Neolithic settlement. Third, rather, they found 100,000 bits of the bones of wild game animals like boar, gazelle, sheep and deer, as well as a variety of bird species. As one expert said, it was pretty clear we were dealing with a hunter-gatherer site. Building on this evidence, the new theory turns the Neolithic Revolution on its head. Rather than monument building as a consequence of agriculture and settlement, it became the impetus for it. Proponents theorize that the enormous number of people required to build the complex, and who chose to remain near after it was completed, required more food than could reliably be collected with hunting and gathering. As one expert opined, "I think they began cultivating wild grasses on the hills in order to feed the masses." Recent findings from other disciplines seem to back this theory up. In the same way anthropologists have used DNA and other evidence to trace our common heritage to a lady who lived in Africa approximately 140,000 years ago, geneticists have traced the migration of plants as well. In particular, the earliest strains of domesticated wheat have been traced back to an ancient village that was only 20 miles from Potbelly Hill. In addition, the first pigs were domesticated in a village only 60 miles away, and the region also saw the first domestic sheep, goats and cattle. Other research has revealed that the practice of agriculture began in the region about 10,500 years ago, only a few centuries after construction at Göbekli Tepe began. In the final analysis, proponents of the new theory conclude the interesting notion that, based on the evidence at hand at the Göbekli Tepe dig, religion motivated people to take up farming.
3. Stone spheres of Costa Rica. Found deep in the jungles of Costa Rica in the 1930s were 300 nearly perfectly round stone balls. They varied in size from a few inches in diameter, to 7 feet across and weighing 16 tons. Scientists aren't sure who made them, how old they are or what purpose they might have had. In the early 1930s the United Fruit Company started searching for new space to plant their banana trees, because their plantations on the eastern side of Costa Rica, in South America, were threatened by disease. On the western side, however, not too far from the Pacific Ocean they found a promising section of land in the Decalog Valley. When they started clearing the land, however, workers found something strange: stone balls. They ranged in size from a few inches to 6 or 7 feet in diameter. The most striking thing about these rock spheres was that many of them appeared to be perfectly round and very, very smooth. Undoubtedly they were man-made. As far as the United Fruit Company was concerned, the strange objects were just in the way of their plantation. Workers rolled them off to the sides of the fields by hand or pushed them using bulldozers. Many were eventually transported to homes or businesses to be used as lawn ornaments. Before authorities could intervene, a rumor that some of the stones contained gold in their cores caused treasure hunters to drill holes in them, load them with dynamite and blow them pieces hoping to get rich. The only thing they found inside the stone spheres, however, was more stone. The science of the stones. The first archaeological investigation of the spheres was done by Doris Stone, a daughter of a United Fruit executive and later the director of Costa Rica's National Museum. Her observations were published in 1943 in the magazine American Antiquity. A few years later in 1948, Samuel Lothrop of the Peabody Museum at Harvard University, while on an expedition to Costa Rica on an unrelated matter, ran into Stone, who told him about the spheres. Lothrop, whose expedition was blocked from its original goal by a civil war, visited the Decalog Valley instead and did an examination of the rock globes. While most legitimate archaeologists have no doubt the stones are the work of an ancient indigenous people, wild stories have grown up about the spheres suggesting that they are connected with aliens or the lost continent of Atlantis. Skeptics argue that primitive people with basic, non-metallic tools could not possibly have made such perfectly round and smooth stones. However, though many of the stones seem startling round, most of them are not as perfect in shape as they might appear to the casual observer. The best measurements were made by Lothrop in the 1950s, but he was hampered in his observations by the size of the larger spheres and the difficulty of getting a tape measure around the spheres still half buried in the ground. Also, not all the balls are perfectly smooth, and many show the evidence of the tools used to make them. Making a sphere. Even if the stones are neither perfectly round or smooth, creating them was still a huge effort. Most of them are composed of granodiorite, a hard, igneous rock that comes from outcropping in the foothills of the nearby Talamanca Mountains. Most likely the carvers carefully chose boulders that were somewhat round in the first place. This type of rock tends to flake off in layers if there is a rapid temperature change, so the carvers may have heated sections with hot coals, then doused them with cold water. After using this method to get the general shape, the final sculpting was probably done by hammering the stone with other smaller stones made of the same hard material. Finally, the surface of the spheres were ground and polished to a high luster using sand or leather. The same process is well known today for shaping smaller stone objects like stone axes and statues. The Calico Indians are often cited as making the stone spheres, but they lived further north from where the balls were found. We don't know exactly who created these globes of rock, but it seems likely it was the ancestors, the people who lived in the region at the time of the Spanish conquest in the 16th century. They would have spoken the Chibchan languages, unlike the Calico who spoke Oto-Mountain, and would have lived in dispersed settlements consisting of less than 2,000 people. They would have made their living by hunting, fishing and farming. They probably raised such plants as beans, squash, papaya, pineapple, and avocado. How old the spheres are is also a question that is not easily answered. Since rock is not living material, it cannot be dated by using a radiocarbon test. However, it is possible to date objects found buried around some of the stones. This is usually pottery. Certain styles of pottery were known to be used during specific periods. This evidence suggests that the stone spheres might have been made as early as 200 BC all the way up to when the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, a range of 1800 years. While this is most likely set of dates, it is possible that at least in some cases the stones were made earlier, then moved, or reshaped at a later date, which was then associated the pottery style of that era. Purpose. Probably the most difficult question to tackle is what were these stone spheres used for? Given that we have no written records from the culture that made them, the best way to figure out their purpose would be to see how they are positioned in relation to each other in other archaeological artifacts like buildings and walls. However, most of the balls have been moved from their original sites at this point, and there are few, if any, records about exactly where they were found. There are some documents suggesting that groups of the spheres were found in geometric arrangements like lines, triangles and parallelograms. However, since they are no longer in these positions, it is impossible cannot confirm these accounts or make new measurements. These stories, however, have led to speculation that they might have been used as compasses, or to make astronomical observations. Another theory is that the balls were used as status symbols. According to John Hoops, of the University of Kansas, who visited the stones in an effort to have them protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the making and moving of the balls was probably an important social activity, perhaps more important than possession of the finished product. We believe that the balls may have sat in front of the houses of prominent people, perhaps as a display of power, of esoteric knowledge, or of control over labor. There are records indicating that some spheres were found on the tops of mounds, which might validate the idea that they were to be displayed as symbols of great status. Ironically, today the balls, some of which now sit in as diverse locations as the private residences of the wealthy in Costa Rica to the courtyard of Harvard University's Peabody Museum in Connecticut, may still be doing their original function, marking the properties of the rich and powerful.
4. Summerwind Mansion. Summerwind Mansion, formerly known as Lamont Mansion, is a now derelict cellar hole on the shores of West Bay Lake in Vilas County, northeast Wisconsin. It is reputed to be one of the most haunted locations in Wisconsin. Due to abandonment, the elements and fire, little of the mansion currently remains standing. Summerwind was originally constructed during the early 20th century as a fishing lodge. In 1916 it was purchased by Robert P. Lamont, who employed Chicago architects Talmadge and Watson to substantially remodel the property and convert it into a mansion. Lamont remained in Summerwind for approximately 15 years, during which time the maids told Lamont that the mansion was haunted, but he did not believe them. However, he is then reported to have abandoned the property suddenly in the mid-1930s, after witnessing an apparition in the mansion's kitchen. After remaining vacant for some time, the house became the residence of Arnold and Ginger Hinshaw and their 4 children, who moved in during the early 1970s. It is from this time onwards that most of the haunting reports originate. After taking up residence, the Hinshaws reported a number of strange occurrences, ranging from flickering shadows that appeared to move down the hallways, and soft voices that stopped when they entered rooms, to unexplained electrical, mechanical problems and sash windows that raised themselves. They also reported seeing the ghost of an unidentified woman, who appeared several times in the vicinity of the house's dining room. Within 6 months of moving into Summerwind, Arnold suffered a breakdown and Ginger attempted suicide. Arnold was sent for treatment and Ginger moved in with her parents in Groton, Wisconsin. In June 1988 Summerwind was struck by lightning several times, resulting in a fire that destroyed much of the mansion. Oddly, lightning struck the house, not the taller trees around it, Today, only the house's chimney stacks, foundations, and stone steps remain.
5. The Real Bell Witch of Tennessee. The story of the Bell Witch has been a mainstay around campfires in the Tennessee area for many years. It is considered to be the most well-documented haunting in American history. The real story of the Bell Witch is very interesting, and more frightening than any movie ever thought about being. The Bell Witch story. In the early 1800s, a man by the name of John Bell decided to follow the lead of many other Americans at the time and seek opportunities out west. He uprooted his family from the Carolinas and moved to the Red River community in Tennessee, present-day Adams, Tennessee. John was very successful in Tennessee. He acquired a large amount of land and a large house in Tennessee to raise his family. He also became a high-ranking official at his local church. His success would unfortunately come with an unbearable price. The haunting did not start until 1817, after the Bells had been settled in their new house for several years. One day John was inspecting his crops when he spotted something strange in his field. He slowly approached the animal armed with his gun. The creature was an abomination of nature. It seemed to have the body of a large dog, but with an unusual head that resembled a rabbit. John took several shots at the animal before it got away from him. John thought nothing more of the incident, as guns in that time period were not known for being accurate, so he just assumed he had missed the strange animal. Side note, why do you think wars in this time period were fought where people stood in line and took turns taking shots at each other? It was to increase the chances they would hit something. This is not a joke, but the truth. This is how inaccurate weapons were. That same night the Bells began hearing strange noises outside of their home. Sometimes it would sound as if someone was beating on the house from the outside. Other times it sounded as if an animal was loudly gnawing on something. As time went by, the Bells frequently began experiencing these noises. The bellman would often rush outside when the noises would start, and try to find the source of the disturbances, but to no avail. One day the noises moved to the inside of the house. The children began claiming that they were hearing the gnawing noises coming from within their rooms and were having trouble sleeping. The activity became more intense when the children began complaining that something was jerking the covers off them and taking their pillows while they tried to sleep. The entity gains strength. As time passed, the entity appeared to gain strength. Soon the family started hearing a faint voice in their homes at night. What the voice was saying was impossible to determine, but it appeared to be the voice of a feeble old woman. The voice eventually became more clear and would sing church songs, quote scripture, and sometimes even took part in conversations, though the voice was always cynical in these discussions. The entity even began identifying itself as the Witch of Cape Bats, a former neighbor who John had several verbal altercations with after a slave purchase between the two ended badly. 3 of John Bell's eldest sons served under General Andrew Jackson in the Battle of New Orleans during the War of 1812. Jackson at the time, 1819, was mayor of Nashville, and was considered a family friend of the Bells. While passing through the Red River area, the future President of the United States decided to visit his old comrades and also satisfy his own curiosity of all the rumors he had been hearing of the Witch of the Bell House. A strange turn of events. Jackson arrived on the Bell property in a horse-pulled wagon accompanied by a group of several war-hardened personal soldiers. While approaching the house, the carriage suddenly halted. The horses struggled to move the wagon, but some unseen force was preventing its progress. Jackson was initially angry. He yelled at his men and cursed at his lazy horses. After a prolonged period of trying to rally his horses into moving the carriage, Jackson finally proclaimed by the eternal, "Boys, that must be the Bell Witch." Suddenly Jackson and his men heard a loud voice laughing and proclaiming that they could proceed. Jackson was startled and cautiously approached the Bell estate. Side note, those who know their history would know that if a human had stopped Jackson's carriage he would have shot him, so this entity startling a man as hardened as Jackson is indeed impressive. Jackson eventually made it into the home of John Bell, in which the two friends began chatting. They discussed the pressing matters of the time period, like what to do about the violent Indians protesting westward expansion and the economic collapse of 1819, when suddenly one of Jackson's men jokingly stated that he was a witch hunter and could rid John Bell of his ghost. The Bell Witch did not take kindly to this and physically beating the man before all who was present. Jackson's men were now terrified. They begged and pleaded with Jackson to leave the Bell estate and find a different place to camp for the night. Jackson, instead of being frightened by the situation, seemed to be intrigued and insisted that they stay the night. The next morning Jackson and his men were spotted in the next town over from Red River. It is unclear whether or not any other paranormal activity was inflicted upon Jackson and his men. John Bell was a prominent figure in the South. He did not want word to get out that he and his family believed that a ghost was haunting them, but he soon had no choice but to confide in someone when the ghost became brutally violent toward his youngest daughter Betsy. The entity would often pull the poor girl's hair and slap her repeatedly, leaving welts and handprint marks on her face and body. One night the witch even tied Betsy's hair to the bedpost. This caused Betsy a tremendous amount of pain and distress. John, unable to bear the stress of the situation alone, eventually told his close friend James Johnston what was happening to him and his family. Johnston was skeptical of his friend's claim, but he volunteered to come and stay at the Bell home to see what he could make of the so-called ghost. Johnston and his wife arrived at the Bell home late one evening and preparations were made for them so they may stay the night. As it turns out, the Bell witch was not shy. Johnston and his wife experienced the same abuse that was bestowed upon the Bell family. Their covers were repeatedly torn off them and they were beaten by the invisible entity. The witch was the cause of much anguish not just for the family but also those associated with the family. When Betsy got old enough to marry, she took interest in a man named Joshua Gardner. The two began dating and eventually became engaged. For whatever reason, the witch despised Gardner. Anytime that Gardner and Betsy were on the Bell property together, the ghost would verbally taunt the couple and even physically assault them. The ghost would also pester Betsy about the marriage while Gardner was not present, warning her that marrying Gardner would end badly. This would eventually lead to Betsy calling off the engagement. As much as the witch hated Gardner, her worst enemy was undoubtedly John Bell. The witch's favorite person to torture in the Bell house was John Bell. In his old age, John would often fall ill, but the ghost would not let John rest. She would poke, scratch, and hit John so he could not sleep when he was in these states of illness. All of this occurred while she would gleefully express her contempt for John loudly enough for the whole house to hear. On the morning of December 20, 1820, John Bell was found dead in his bed. A couple nights before, John had complained of feeling ill and went to bed and never recovered. The morning of his death, a strange vial containing an unknown black liquid was found in a cupboard near his bed. One of John's sons gave a drop of the liquid to the family cat and it died instantly. Upon the cat's death, the witch's disembodied voice laughed and exclaimed, "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night," which fixed him. In a fit of rage, John's son immediately threw the container in the fireplace. The fire roared and shot out a large puff of smoke. His funeral was one of the largest that the small Tennessee county that John called home had ever hosted. As John was placed in the ground, mourners began hearing laughing and singing that had no explainable source. After John's death, all was quiet on the Bell for a little while. A few months passed and the ghost returned. She began speaking to John's wife, proclaiming that she would return in 7 years. She kept her promise and again began tormenting the Bell family, particularly focusing on John Bell Jr. She again would soon announce her departure and vowed to return in 107 years to torment those who remained of the Bell family. That year would have been 1935, and the closet living descendant was a physician named Dr. Charles Bailey Bell. It is undocumented whether or not Dr. Bell received his visit. Today not much is left of the old Bell estate. The popular spot to go and search for the witch is a cave on the Bell property. Cameras and other electronic equipment are known to malfunction in this area. Cameras particularly will return photos that have mists, orbs, or humanoid shapes, blotches that appear in the foreground of the pictures. Many claim that the Bell witch never really left the Bell estate but instead dwells in this cave.
6. Baigong pipes. A wapart, out-of-place artifact, is a term applied to dozens of prehistoric objects found in various places around the world, that seem to show a level of technological advancement incongruous with the times in which they were made. Awaparts often frustrate conventional scientists, delight adventurous investigators open to alternative theories, and spark debate. In a mysterious pyramid in China's Qinghai province near Mount Baigong are 3 caves filled with pipes leading to a nearby saltwater lake. There are also pipes under the lake bed and on the shore. The iron pipes range in size, with some smaller than a toothpick. The strangest part is that they may be about 150,000 years old. Dating done by the Beijing Institute of Geology determined These iron pipes were smelted about 150,000 years ago, if they were indeed made by humans, according to Brian Dunning of Skeptoid.com. And if they were made by humans, history as it is commonly viewed would have to be re-evaluated. The dating was done using thermoluminescence, a technique that determines how long ago crystalline mineral was exposed to sunlight or heated. Humans are only thought to have inhabited the region for the past 30,000 years. Even within the known history of the area, the only humans to inhabit the region were nomads whose lifestyle would not leave any such structures behind. The state-run news agencies in Hua in China reported on the pyramid, the pipes, and the research began by a team scientists sent to investigate in 2002. Though some have since tried to explain the pipes as a natural phenomenon, Yang Ji, a research fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, told Xinhua the pyramid may have been built by intelligent beings. He did not dismiss the theory that ancient extraterrestrials may be responsible, saying this theory is understandable and worth looking into. But scientific means must be employed to prove whether or not it is true. Another theory is that it was built by prehistoric humans with techniques lost to humans of a later period. The pipes lead into a salty lake, though a twin lake nearby contains fresh water. The surrounding landscape is strewn with what Xinhua described as strangely shaped stones. Rocks protrude from the ground like broken pillars. The head of the publicity department at the local Linga government told Xinhua the pipes were analyzed at a local smeltery and 8% of the material could not be identified. The rest was made up of ferric oxide, silicon dioxide, and calcium oxide. The silicon dioxide and calcium oxide are products of long interaction between the iron and surrounding sandstone, showing the ancient age of the pipes. Liu Shelin, the engineer who did the analysis, told Xinhua, "This result has made the site even more mysterious. Nature is harsh here," he said. "There are no residents, let alone modern industry in the area, only a few migrant herdsmen to the north of the mountain." To further add to the mystery, Zheng Jiandong, a geology research fellow from the China Earthquake Administration, told state-run newspaper People's Daily in 2007, that some of the pipes were found to be highly radioactive. Other theories. Jiandong said iron-rich magma may have risen from deep in the earth, bringing the iron into fissures where it would solidify into tubes. Though he admitted, there is indeed something mysterious about these pipes. He cited the radioactivity as an example of the strange qualities of the pipes. Others have said iron sediments may have washed into the fissures, carried with water during floods. Those in Hua and other publications in China have referred to a pyramid or even a mysterious pyramid in which the pipes were found. Some have said it was a pyramid-shaped natural formation. Another theory is that the pipes are fossilized tree roots. Xinmin Weekly reported in 2003 that scientists found plant matter in an analysis of the pipes, and they also found what looked like tree rings. The article related the finding to a geological theory that in certain temperatures and under certain chemical conditions, tree roots can undergo diagenesis, transformation of soil into rock, and other processes that can produce iron formations. Reports on the tree root explanation for the so-called Baigong pipes often lead back to this Xinmin Weekly article or lack citation. It's unclear exactly how well supported this theory is in relation to the Baigong pipes. An article published in the Journal of Sedimentary Research in 1993 describes fossilized tree roots in South Louisiana in the United States.
7. Los Lunas Decalog Stone. Lost civilizations, mysterious artifacts, and vanished peoples have always fascinated those with an interest in antiquity. However, the first archaeologists were little more than glorified treasure hunters. It was only later that the scientific method and rigorous systems of recording and excavating archaeological sites were established in the field by people like C.J. Thompson, Jen Jacobson Asmussen Worsey, and Flinders Petrie. Scientifically minded archaeologists tend to treat claims of the lost or forgotten with much more skepticism than their treasure hunting predecessors. Yet, extraordinary claims about archaeological finds still occur in archaeology. An example of this is the Los Lunas Decalog stone. It is a stone found southwest of Albuquerque, New Mexico, with the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, described in Exodus 20-117 of the Hebrew Old Testament written on it. Some people say the stone predates Christopher Columbus' voyage to Hispaniola by as much as 1,500 years. This is an interesting possibility, but how does it stand up to scrutiny? Los Lunas Decalog stone is a slab of basalt which appears to have the Ten Commandments written on it in Paleo-Hebrew script. Paleo-Hebrew is an early form of the Hebrew alphabet and is similar to the Phoenician alphabet. The earliest known use of Paleo-Hebrew is the Gezer calendar dating to the 10th century BC. The Los Lunas Decalog stone was discovered by the archaeologist Frank Hibben, who said that he was brought to the site by a guide who discovered the stone in the 1880s. In 1985, George Morehouse, a mineralogist and a member of the Epigraphic Society, examined the stone and said it was 500 to 2,000 years old. After comparing it to graffiti dating to the 1930s, he estimated the age based on how much the rock had been weathered by wind-blown sand. Over the years, several language and religious scholars have examined the script, including Professors James Tabor, Cyrus Gordon, Reinhard Pummer, and Skupin. The text has some interesting characteristics. For example, although it is an early form of Hebrew, it also shows Hellenistic influence. In some areas, Greek letters are substituted for Hebrew letters. However, it also uses an archaic form of the Hebrew letter Aleph, roughly equivalent to the Latin letter A. There are symbols included in the text which were not used in Hebrew until the Middle Ages, which presents a problem in dating it before that time. Critics of the text's authenticity also take issue with the presence of orthographic errors. For example, the author treated Aleph as a vowel, when in ancient Hebrew it was a consonant. The text's creator also made mistakes with other letters, such as treating two letters representing distinct sounds as if they were the same sound, kaf and kof, which are rendered as k in English transliteration. Is the stone authentic? Skeptics point to these orthographic errors as evidence against the authenticity of the stone. They say that the ancient Hebrews would not have made such elementary mistakes with a sacred text. However, defenders of the stone's authenticity contend that the mistakes simply suggest that it was written by someone who did not speak Hebrew as a first language, perhaps a native Greek speaker instead. Skupin and Cyrus Gordon, for example, suggest that whoever made the inscription lived in the Byzantine period. Their hypothesis is based on word order, and they note similarities between spelling in Hebrew and conventions used in Greek at that time. While this is plausible, the text also contains conventions that were not added until well after the Byzantine period, such as symbols used to indicate a letter that is missing from a word. This makes a medieval or post-medieval date more likely. Linguist Cyrus Gordon suggests that the stone was a Samaritan mezuzah, stone slab bearing the Decalogue placed at the entrance of a property or synagogue, and that the style reflects a Samaritan source rather than a Paleo-Hebrew one. The problem with this hypothesis is that although the style may look Samaritan, the text itself does not follow Samaritan wording, but uses ancient Jewish Masoretic words. For example, the stone has the Masoretic form "remember the Sabbath day," while the Samaritan version uses "preserve the Sabbath day."
8. Black Hope Curse. The ancient Black Hope Curse is said to plague the land that is located just outside the city of Houston in the state of Texas. As you explore the land that is said to hold the Black Hope Curse, you will observe luxurious homes that possess carefully crafted lawns. In order to explain the curse, I will outline the experience of a couple that purchased a home in the area in the early 1980s. The man's name was Sam Haney. He and his wife, Judith, discovered the home and realized that it was the home that they had been searching diligently for. Once the couple settled into their home, a man with an air of mystery and intrigue arrived at their door. Being new to the neighborhood, the couple welcomed the visit of the man. Little did they realize that this individual would change their lives forever. They had recently started work on a swimming pool in the backyard section of their property. The man immediately informed them that the backyard possessed a secret that they needed to be aware of. The man then started walking to the backyard, so Sam followed him. Once they came to a certain spot, the man pointed at the area and informed Sam that there were human remains buried in that area of the land. Despite the fact that the man's visit was mysterious and his revelations seemed a bit absurd, Sam found the revelations to be unsettling. In order to put his own mind at ease, he decided to investigate the area of land that the man pointed out just to see if his accusations were true. Not too long after Sam began digging through the land, he actually hit something. This drew his interest enough that he started digging the rest of the way with his hands. Not too long after that, he ran into boards that were made of pine. Eventually, he got to the point where he could open up the container. That is when he saw the remains of a human. The local authorities were notified immediately. A full investigation started on the land. There was more than one casket with skeletal remains. The second that they investigated apparently belonged to a woman, as 2 wedding rings were discovered on the human remains. The Hanis thought that it would be best to determine who was buried on their land. This is when they contacted a man who was known to have buried several people in the past, Jasper Norton. This individual informed the couple that their home and several others were constructed on top of a cemetery that was called Black Hope, which was designated for African Americans, particularly those that had been slaves in life. It is believed that approximately 60 or more African Americans were laid to rest in the Black Hope Cemetery. The last burial was believed to have occurred somewhere around the year of 1939. The individuals that were located on Sam and Judith's property were believed to be Charlie Thomas and his wife, who was named Betty. It is believed that they were buried in the 1930s. When the Hanis learned of this, they decided that it may be best to hold a proper burial for the couple and allow them to remain on the property. Little did they know that this would mark the beginning of the Black Hope curse. The Hanis, along with several of their neighbors, began to experience many unusual events. They would hear doors open and close, items would come up missing, talking and whispers could be heard, and it seemed that house plants would never grow appropriately. All of the neighbors felt a high level of uneasiness. Electronics would turn on and off, as well as water faucets. Eventually, the individuals living on the grounds would start to feel extremely sick. One even died of a heart attack. Several people reported observing ghostly apparitions and reported feeling terrified. Today, new people live in the neighborhood as all of the old people were scared away from the Black Hope curse. Ironically, no reports have been made since. Today, this is considered to be one of the greatest mysteries of all time.
9. The Polaroid Mystery. Calico left her house on Brugg Street in Belen, New Mexico to go on a bike ride at 9:30 on the morning of September 20, 1988. She took her mother's bicycle because her own bike had a flat tire. She was last seen riding her mother's neon pink Huffy mountain bike with yellow control cables and sidewalls on Highway 47 in Valencia County, at approximately 11:45 a.m. This location is approximately 2 miles from her home. She has never been seen again. Calico biked the route daily during her routine 36-mile ride. Witnesses saw a dirty white or light gray colored 1953 Ford pickup truck with a white handmade shelf following Calico during her ride. It is not known if the truck is connected to her presumed abduction. She was apparently unaware of the truck's presence. Her mother's bicycle has never been located. A photo of it is posted below this case summary. Foul play is suspected in Calico's disappearance. Calico is described as an efficient, independent person who liked to make lists scheduling her days. She enjoys running. On the day she vanished, she was concerned about staying on schedule and asked her mother, Patty Dole, to come get her if she was not home by 12 p.m. Calico had plans to play tennis with her boyfriend at 12:30 p.m., and a class at 4 p.m. that day. She graduated Belen High School and was enrolled as a sophomore at University of New Mexico at Valencia at the time of her disappearance. She had a high grade point average and planned to become a psychiatrist or a psychologist. She also held a job at a local bank. When Calico vanished, she left behind her sneakers and equipment, school books, and purse. Dole went to look for her at 12:05 p.m. the day she was last seen. When she could not find her along her usual bike route, she contacted police. The next day, Dole found a Boston cassette tape belonging to Calico by the side of the road. It was 3 miles from her home, and on opposite side of the highway, as if she had dropped it while riding away from her residence. Later, part of Calico's Sony Walkman was recovered 19 miles east of Highway 47 near the remote John F. Kennedy campground. Dole believed her daughter deliberately left those items to mark her trail. Near where the cassette tape was found were some bike tracks and marks resembling a scuffle or skids. Rumors have persisted for years that Calico was the unidentified female in a Polaroid photo discovered in Port St. Joe, Florida on June 15, 1989, 9 months following her disappearance. A white Toyota cargo van had been parked in the spot prior to the discovery of the picture. The photo was located on the ground in a convenience store's parking lot in St. Joe. It depicted a long-legged young woman and a smaller boy lying on some sheets and a blue striped pillow. Their mouths were covered with duct tape and their hands tied behind their backs. The photograph was taken in the back of a white Toyota cargo van with no windows, manufactured in the late 1980s. Polaroid officials say the picture had to have been taken after May 1989, the film it was made of was not available until then. A copy of the V.C. Andrews novel My Sweet Audrina, a plastic cup, and a squirt gun are also visible in the photo. V.C. Andrews also happens to be Calico's favorite author. There is apparently a phone number written on the spine of the book, but some of the digits are unreadable. Experts say it could be 300 possible numbers, 57 of which are valid. Authorities believe that the girl in the photo was seen walking along the beach in Port St. Joe shortly before the Polaroid was located. Witnesses said that the girl was accompanied by several unidentified adult Caucasian males who appeared to be giving her verbal orders. An unidentified boy was also pictured in the photo. Both he and the girl were bound and gagged. The girl's photo and a computer-generated image of the boy are posted below this case summary. Some people believe that the boy in the picture was Michael Henley, a 9-year-old boy who vanished in April 1988 from the same area of New Mexico as Calico. His mother identified the boy in the photograph as her son. Henley's remains were found in the Zuni Mountains in 1990. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, examined the photo and cannot determine whether the girl is Calico or the boy Henley. The girl's hairline and ear are similar to Calico's, and she has a mark on her calf similar to a scar Calico got from a car accident injury. It is not known whether the Polaroid was staged or whether the boy and girl were being held against their will. 2 other similar photographs have surfaced over the years. One Polaroid, made on film that was unavailable until June 1989, was found near a residential construction site in Montecito, California and depicted a girl's face with her mouth covered by duct tape. The image is blurry, but Dole said she thought the girl in the photo is her daughter. She has a cowlick on her right temple like Calico, and also a lazy eye like Calico has. The blue striped fabric the girl is lying on is similar to the pillow in the first photo. The third Polaroid photograph was shot on film not available until February of 1990 shows a woman who is loosely bound in gauze and has her eyes covered with gauze and large black framed glasses. There is a man sitting next to her on the passenger seat of an Amtrak train. Dole wasn't sure whether the girl in the photo was her daughter. She believed this photograph may be a cruel joke. Police have information that Calico was approached by 2 teenage boys on the day of her disappearance and they accidentally hit her with their truck while they were following her and harassing her. Investigators believe the boys took her away from the scene in their vehicle and that they panicked and killed her after she threatened to go to the police. Several other individuals may have been involved in covering up the crime. This information has not been confirmed and no suspects have been publicly identified. Authorities believe Calico's body is probably in the same general area she went missing from. Calico's mother and stepfather continued to live in the house where she'd lived until 15 years after her disappearance, when they moved to Florida. Dole died in 2006. Calico's biological father died in 2002. Her stepfather and siblings are still alive. Calico's case remains unsolved.
10. Sea of Galilee cairn. A giant monumental stone structure discovered beneath the waters of the Sea of Galilee in Israel, has archaeologists puzzled as to its purpose and even how long ago it was built. The mysterious structure is cone-shaped, made of unhewn basalt cobbles and boulders, and weighs an estimated 60,000 tons, the researchers said. That makes it heavier than most modern-day warships. Rising nearly 32 feet, 10 meters, high, it has a diameter of about 230 feet, 70 meters. To put that in perspective, the outer stone circle of Stonehenge has a diameter just half that, with its tallest stones not reaching that height. It appears to be a giant cairn, rocks piled on top of each other. Structures like this are known from elsewhere in the world and are sometimes used to mark burials. Researchers do not know if the newly discovered structure was used for this purpose. The structure was first detected in the summer of 2003, during the sonar survey of the southwest portion of the sea. Divers have since been down to investigate, they write in the latest issue of the International Journal of Nautical Archaeology. Close inspection by scuba diving revealed that the structure is made of basalt boulders up to 1 meter, 3.2 feet, long with no apparent construction pattern, the researchers write in their journal article. The boulders have natural faces with no signs of cutting or chiseling. Similarly, we did not find any sign of arrangement or walls that delineate this structure. They say it is definitely human-made and probably was built on land, only later to be covered by the Sea of Galilee as the water level rose. The shape and composition of the submerged structure does not resemble any natural feature. We therefore conclude that it is man-made and might be termed a cairn, the researchers write. More than 4,000 years old? Underwater archaeological excavation is needed so scientists can find associated artifacts and determine the structure's date and purpose, the researchers said. Researcher Yitzhak Paz, of the Israel Antiquities Authority and Ben-Gurion University, believes it could date back more than 4,000 years. The more logical possibility is that it belongs to the 3rd millennium BC, because there are other megalithic phenomena, from that time, that are found close by, Paz told Live Science in an interview, noting that those sites are associated with fortified settlements. The researchers list several examples of megalithic structures found close to the Sea of Galilee that are more than 4,000 years old. One example is the monumental site of Khirbet Betia, located some 19 miles, 30 kilometers, northeast of the submerged stone structure, the researchers write. It comprises 3 concentric stone circles, the largest of which is 56 meters, 184 feet, in diameter. An ancient city. If the 3rd millennium BC date idea proves correct, it would put the structure about a mile to the north of a city that researchers call Betyera or Khirbet Kerak. During the 3rd millennium BC the city was one of the biggest sites in the region, Paz said. It's the most powerful and fortified town in this region and, as a matter of fact, in the whole of Israel. Archaeologist Raphael Greenberg describes it in a chapter of the book Daily Life, Materiality, and Complexity in Early Urban Communities of the Southern Levant, Eisenberg 2011, as being a heavily fortified 74-acre, 30 hectares, site with up to 5,000 inhabitants. With paved streets and towering defenses, its people were clearly well organized. They also indicate the existence of some kind of municipal authority able to maintain public structures. Greenberg writes. The research team says that, like the leaders of Betyera, whoever built the newly discovered Sea of Galilee structure needed sophisticated organization and planning skills to construct it. The effort invested in such an enterprise is indicative of a complex, well-organized society, with planning skills and economic ability, they write in their journal paper. Paz added that in order to build such a structure a lot of working hours were required in an organized community effort. Future exploration. Paz said that he hopes soon that an underwater archaeological expedition will set out to excavate the structure. They can search for artifacts and try to determine its date with certainty. He said that the Israel Antiquities Authority has a research branch capable of excavating it. We will try to do it in the near future, I hope, but it depends on a lot of factors.